long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Trey Orndorff, a political scientist at Oklahoma Christian University, and I'm joined by Professor of Law at Chase Law School, Ken. And today, we are on our Constitution Supporters Exclusive Midweek Show. Ken, welcome back.
It's nice to be back, Trey.
Slowly but surely and excitingly, we make our way through the Constitution, don't we, Ken?
Yeah. And the 12th Amendment today, that's a big one because it's a lot of history, but not a lot of Supreme Court case law.
It's true. And so that means, that it's a little bit different of an analysis you do on this front. And just as we always do, we read that portion of the Constitution, and in this case, it's going to take us. The 12th Amendment is not a short amendment, but we'll try to kind of read through that, and we'll take on what that does. And what the 12th Amendment says is, quote, "The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom, at least, shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots the persons voted for as vice president, and they shall make distinct lists of all persons voted for as presidents and of all persons voted for as vice president, and of the number of votes for each, which lists they shall sign and certify and transmit sealed to the seat of government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. And if no person have such majority, then from the persons having the highest numbers, not exceeding 3 on the list of those voted for as president, the House of Representatives shall choose immediately, by ballot, the president. But in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states, the representative from each state having 1 vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of a number of members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice." Whew, so there's a lot of things going on there. And then it goes on to say, the person having the greatest number of votes as vice president shall be the vice president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if no person have a majority, then from the 2 highest numbers on the list, the Senate shall choose the vice president. A quorum, again, consisting of 2/3 of the whole number of the senators and a majority of the whole number necessary to a choice. But no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of the vice president of the United States. Whoa, I think that's my longest read for our Constitution show there, Ken.
A lot of words, and fairly dense, a lot of it too.
It is a lot of dense, but it's not really. This is one of those ones. Sometimes we read like some smaller phrases, but there's some really deep things going. It's not maybe as hard as you might think to understand the 12th Amendment, at least in a basic way, because really the 12th Amendment is a response to the election of 1800, right? And so we're going to do a little bit of history today to really understand what happened. So the 12th Amendment, it's
and even 1796 and 1800, but mainly 1800 for sure.
Absolutely agreed. The 1796 is more of an administrative issue that we'll talk about. And I think what really drives one of the fastest amendments of all time is then the controversy of 1800. But you're not wrong at all. So keep in mind, we've already talked about this earlier in our Constitution show. The original electoral system is established in Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, and each elector casted 2 votes in that system. What the 12th Amendment is doing there in that dense language, though, is it is doing something that Article 2, Section 1 didn't do, and that is distinguish between the president and the vice president. In that original system, the candidate with the majority became president, and the runner-up becomes a vice president. And so that's what leads to those system complications you're talking about in 1796. So in 1796, Adams, who's a Federalist, John Adams, becomes president, and his opponent, Thomas Jefferson, who's a Democratic Republican, becomes vice president. And it leads to this very difficult administration with opposing views. As a matter of fact, one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize is Jefferson and Adams were extremely close. They had gotten very close in France, serving diplomatic duty. As a matter of fact, John Quincy Adams, he kept an extensive diary. And, the amount of time he spent and then Jefferson spent at his family's home in France was nearly constant. So these are two really, really close guys, but they disagreed very deeply on the political views. Adams was very much a Federalist, and Jefferson was very much opposed to that view. And you got to remember as well, Jefferson was not in the country when the Constitution was founded, and he thought that there were some problems with it that needed to be resolved in a way that Adams was not as convinced of. And so as Jefferson becomes seemingly a block to what Adams is attempting to do, there is a rift between those two men's friendship. And simultaneously, it brings to fore in those 4 years the deeply complicated problem of having an opponent end up being in your office. And as a matter of fact, for just a little historic note, Jefferson, as he gets later into his career as a vice president, ends up having apparently written a letter to Adams attempting to kind of smooth over what had happened leading up to the election of 1796 and what had occurred in the immediate aftermath thereof as he being the vice president. But he ends up declining to send it. And so political scientists and historians have often pondered thereafter, Ken, what would have happened had Jefferson done that. But he doesn't. And so instead, we end up having Adams in 1800 run for re-election against his own vice president, right? So you got a really awkward circumstance. And so in the election of 1800, you end up having a tie, but not the way you would anticipate. You end up having a tie between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. Okay, so who's Aaron Burr? Well, even by 1800, you have individuals running with a vice president. They're running or attempting to run as a slate. As a matter of fact, in the political science, consider that kind of almost an inevitability. Parties form in democratic systems. And as we've talked about, Ken, right, one of the things that our Constitution attempted to do was to minimize the effect of party. But it's one of those natural things that emerge in social relationships, in democratic social relationships. And so despite the efforts to not have that happen, it's a flaw. And so you have these individuals running. And so because there's no distinction in Article 2, Section 1, Jefferson and Burr, both Democratic Republicans, end up tying. So what the Constitution, before the 12th Amendment, says is, well, you're going to have a tiebreaker. Same way we see it there in the 12th Amendment, but the difference being it is just between, there's no distinction between president and vice president. Now, Jefferson kind of thinks that Burr is going to end up just bowing out and saying, well, look, I ran as the vice president, that's not a big deal. But instead, to kind of sum that up, there's no quote this way, but the way I kind of put it to students, he kind of looks at it and through his proxies tells Jefferson, look, I'm looking at the scoreboard and we're tied, right? People cast presidential ballots for me too. And we could spend a lot of time talking about Aaron Burr. But that means that it gets thrown to the House of Representatives and it leads to a really protracted and contentious process. And it takes 36 ballots to finally break the tie in the House over what's going to happen. And there's no other proceeding in the Constitution for what to do if you end up with that tie in the House, right? I mean, it is undoubtedly the earliest constitutional crisis that we serve in terms of in the presidential history. So, can you imagine what it would be like if we got thrown to the House today?
Well, I think one thing now because we have the 12th Amendment, it's each in the House, each state only gets the one vote. So I think just because of the geography in the country today, Actually, that means the House would vote for a Republican, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of our ad-supported preview of the Supporters Midweek Show. So, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation with myself and Ken as we go through the 12th Amendment, it's time for you to head to patreon.com/politicsguys and become a supporter. As a matter of fact, you don't just get the 12th Amendment. You get the 11th and the 10th and the 9th, the entire Bill of Rights, the whole Constitution. That's right. Ken and I have been working on the Constitution for over a year now, and we would love for you to have access to that entire back catalog of myself and Ken's Constitution shows, but specifically the one we've just been recording for this week on the 12th Amendment. And to do that, you're going to head to patreon.com/politicsguys and support the show. And remember, if you become a yearly supporter, you get a discount. Now, there's a lot of ways you can support the Politics Guys. We're on Venmo, where we're at Politics Guys. You can also support us through PayPal. All of those are in the support links in the show notes. So just take a look there in the show notes and click on the support of your choice. I'd love to have you finish that out. Or if you'd like to head your web browser there, just head to politicsguys.com/support. Now, if you'd like to get the rest of this episode, but you're just not quite in that financial position to do so, remember you can reach out to mail@politicsguys.com and we can get some things set up. Now, whether you're a supporter or not, don't forget to write, subscribe, and rate and review this on whatever podcast app you use. You could also shoot us questions at mail@politicsguys.com. I want to give a huge shout out to some amazing supporters and executive producers of the Politics Guys, and they are Bruce Johnson, Wilma Marino, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, and Don Oglesby. We'll be back this weekend with a full episode. I hope you'll join us then.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,